I take all of that as extremely positive. And so that's just my view. I feel like we're gonna have another great year in Bitcoin. Lower rates will mean a higher Bitcoin. Lower rates will mean a higher Ethereum. You could be sitting here with lower interest rates and Bitcoin's up over 100,000. Not impossible. Bitcoin's going up. And he said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, I didn't meet a person at Davos. I didn't meet a member of the white badge delegation. Those are the people that, are the diplomats and the heads of state and policymakers and central bankers and CEOs of large companies. I didn't meet one of those people that liked Bitcoin or thought Bitcoin had any legs. In fact, many of those people were telling me that Bitcoin was a dead asset and it was a road to nowhere and soon to be a ghost chain. And so what I find about Davos is the collective wisdom of the elites, because they're trying to impress each other. And, that was the trend at the time. They all hopped out on that and they got it wrong. And so this year, there was a muted situation in Davos. So meaning if you talk to somebody and say, oh, I hear Bitcoin had a great year, but really who cares? It's an insignificant asset and the blockchain itself is insignificant and Web3 is not going anywhere and we're traditional finance people. And then of course, Jamie Dimon gave a pretty high profile interview on CNBC where he routed Bitcoin and other blockchain oriented assets. So I take all of that as extremely positive. And so that's just my view. I feel like we're gonna have another great year in Bitcoin, but because we still have fence sitters and naysayers, and the way markets work, Tone, is that you got fence sitters and naysayers, as they come off the fence and they stop naysaying, the price goes up. Right. If you have no fence sitters and you have no naysayers, then you and I got to be worried. We got to talk about that being a top.
Anthony, I almost treat Jamie Dimon now as like a contrarian indicator. Like if he's continuing his FUD, I am bullish.
What I do find with people like Jamie of his vintage, of his era, and I think Jamie's 67 now, if you don't do the homework on Bitcoin and you're opining on it, you're probably opining negatively because of your life experience. But if you do the homework, and contemporaries of Jamie would include people like Stan Druckenmiller, Paul Tudor Jones, Ray Dalio, those men, they did the homework on Bitcoin and they drew a different conclusion. And I would say something to you that I would hope your viewers and listeners would contemplate. The more homework you do on Bitcoin, the more you go towards Bitcoin. I sort of feel like Bitcoin research and Bitcoin due diligence is a one-way ticket towards Bitcoin. I have yet to find somebody that says, I read everything, I got steeped in the understanding of the code, I got steeped in the understanding of the network and the decentralized nature of the network and the fact that it hasn't been hacked and has been up and running for 14 years. I did all the work and I hate Bitcoin. Jamie's an example of somebody that probably needs to do the homework. Sure. Larry Fink, on the other hand, 2 years ago, I met with Larry in Abu Dhabi, and we were in the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel together. He was very negative on Bitcoin.
Right.
And he said, well, he was positive on stable coins. He had just made an investment in Circle, but he was very, very negative on Bitcoin. And here we are 2 years later, he's all in, and he's talking about the tokenization of assets, the digitization of assets, and he's trying to make IBIT, which is the BlackRock ETF, the largest Bitcoin ETF. In fact, if you took the 11 Bitcoin ETFs, this has been the most successful launch in terms of aggregate dollars in ETF history. You know this, and I know this. jpmorgan, as you mentioned, they're an AP on the ETFs for people. They're producing research on Bitcoin. They have their own coin. They have built a element of their blockchain. You can call, if you have an account at JP Morgan in the private bank, and you call them and say, hi, unsolicited, I'd like to buy $25,000, $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, something like that. No problem. They'll buy for you and they'll put that CUSIP in your account. You'll sit there with the Blackstone Bitcoin Trust in a JP Morgan account
But then, you have Gary Gensler, who's under the control of Elizabeth Warren. He's losing in court, but he's not giving up. Do
Yeah.
you think this thing ends after the 2024 election?
If Trump wins that election, obviously those two people will have less influence. Elizabeth Warren will still be in the Congress, but Gary Gensler will no longer be the SEC chairman. So there'll be a new group of elites that are running the SEC. So the question is, though, will that be better or not? I don't honestly know the answer because Donald Trump has spoken very negatively about Bitcoin. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy has convinced Donald Trump that he should never have a central bank digital currency. So Trump is behind that now. I think Trump also made some money on these NFTs.
Yeah, I was going to ask
you. So
maybe
that's going to open his mind to the world of digital assets and Web3. But I don't think 80-year-old people, Donald Trump, 75-year-old Elizabeth Warren, 80-year-old Joe Biden are the right people to make regulatory decisions about this asset class. So I don't necessarily think a Republican win is going to be better. It may end up being worse in some ways. So we'll have to see, as it relates to crypto in general. Yesterday, Gensler came out and said, well, despite the fact that we approved against my greater wishes, we approved the ETF, I am now letting you know that may be the last one. I'm not going to approve the Ethereum ETF. And look, there'll be lawsuits about the Ethereum ETF, but I'll just give you his brand of thinking. If he approves the ETF, then every one of those pillows behind you is going to get an ETF, and I don't think he wants that. And so, we can argue about it, but and he could lose the court cases, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have tricks up his sleeve to delay this stuff. That Bitcoin ETF should have been approved in 2014.
Yeah.
And it would have saved retail investors. It created the grayscale debacle with the 2% fees and the discount and the surplus and all that stuff that happened to the grayscale Bitcoin trust because it wasn't an ETF. All of that stuff could have been avoided, but we're not in it anymore for protecting the investor. We're not in it anymore for advancing financial innovation. We're in it for politics, and that really sucks for the country.
Now, these ETFs going live, certainly historic. Do you feel we've crossed the chasm of Bitcoin and crypto going mainstream? There's no longer any type of hesitation or psychological barrier, I don't know about this stuff, right? Or it's too complicated for me to try to buy it on Coinbase. But now it's, hey, BlackRock has it, Fidelity has it. I know these names. I trust these names.
Really, really, really good question. And so I think we have crossed that chasm. I think the sloppiness is from the price differentials. Okay, so if I own the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust and it's finally traded back to par, and I bought it at a loss, maybe I bought those coins at 50, 60,000, my proclivity is going to be to sell those coins. And if I want to stay in Bitcoin, to buy the Bitcoin ETF after I've sold that. And so you're seeing a tremendous amount of sloppiness. I think there was another $400 million worth of Bitcoin on chain this morning moved from the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust into an exchange to liquidate that. And I think they're going to have heavy selling. Now you'd say to yourself, well, why did they go from 2% to 1.5%? Everyone's out at 20 basis points. I think they need the fees. And I think they're making the bet that there's a lot of people that have low cost tax lots, low cost tax basis, and are not going to necessarily sell to save 120 basis points, which is the net differential between the fees of the ETF and Grayscale.
What is your outlook for the Fed and how they will take action? Because that has affected markets, of course.
Well, it's an election year. And so I'll say a couple of things. The Stock Trader Almanac, 125 years of election year observation, 85% of the time the market goes up in an election year. I wouldn't bet against that trend. The Fed has said that they're more or less done raising rates. And it being an election year, and I know they try to be apolitical, they're sort of political, they'll probably start cutting rates. The question is, how much will they cut and when? And I think when they say higher longer, I just think it's going to be lower longer. And what do I mean by that? Probably don't cut rates until the second half of the year, and then they cut them pretty quickly. But I think that they'll probably leave people with an impression that they're not cutting them in the first half, and then by June, July, they'll start cutting them. Well, yes, and the market's gone up a lot. I'm talking about the stock market. So if the Fed cuts rates and the market doesn't move a lot, it won't surprise me because it's been anticipatory. Same way Bitcoin went up a lot into the ETF news. Once it got announced, it traded a little bit sloppily. But I do believe that interest rates are the physical gravity of financial assets. You lower rates, you're going to increase the value of those assets. It's just the way it works. So lower rates will mean a higher Bitcoin. Lower rates will mean a higher Ethereum. And so it'll be generally a good thing. Will it happen instantaneously? No. But will it happen? Sure. Remember, these things are what Buffett once said, the markets are a voting machine or a popularity contest in the short term, but they're a weighing machine over long periods of time where they weigh the fundamentals of something. And so you could be sitting here with lower interest rates and Bitcoin's up over 100,000. Not impossible.